"Mr. Cross, you're listed as the father." Those 7 words shattered the life Nora Whitaker had spent 15 months trying to protect. It was raining hard in Portland that night, the kind of cold rain that turns headlights into ghosts on the windshield. Nora ran through the emergency room doors with her 8-month-old son burning against her chest, his tiny body too still, his breath too weak. She had no money for another disaster, no family to call, and one secret she swore would never leave her mouth. But when the doctor asked for the father's medical history, Nora had to choose between her fear of Mason Cross and the life of their child. Stay with this story, because this is not just about love. It is about secrets, power, motherhood, and the dangerous price of protection. Like this video and comment where you're watching from. That one call did not begin in the hospital. It began 15 months earlier in a city Nora Whitaker had promised herself she would never return to. Chicago looked beautiful from the sky, especially at night. The lake was black glass. The towers glittered like knives. From the penthouse windows of Mason Cross's apartment, the city seemed to belong to him. Nora used to stand there barefoot on the marble floor, one hand around a cup of coffee gone cold, watching traffic slide along Lakeshore Drive, while her husband spoke in low voices behind closed doors. She had been married to a man everyone respected in public and feared in private. Mason Cross owned shipping companies, construction firms, warehouses, restaurants, and half the favors that moved quietly through the city after midnight. His name appeared in business magazines beside words like disciplined, visionary, and private. But Nora had learned that private was just another word for dangerous when a man had enough money to bury the truth. The first year of their marriage had almost fooled her. Mason could be gentle when he wanted to be. He remembered how she took her coffee. He noticed when she was cold before she said anything. He bought her books, she mentioned once in passing. At charity galas, his hand stayed warm at the small of her back, steady and possessive, as if she were the only real thing in a room full of polished lies. But love with Mason always had locked doors around it. His phone never stopped ringing. His men came and went at strange hours. Sometimes he left the bed without waking her, and returned before dawn, smelling like rain smoke and a world he refused to name. Once she found him in the bathroom at 3 a.m, sleeves rolled up, washing blood from his knuckles. She stood in the doorway, frozen. "Mason," she whispered. He looked at her through the mirror. His eyes were calm. Too calm. "Go back to bed, Nora. Is that yours?" He glanced at his hands like the blood had surprised him. No. That was all he gave her. No explanation. No apology. Just one word and the expectation that she would obey the silence that followed. The next morning there were fresh flowers in the kitchen and a diamond bracelet on the counter. Nora left both untouched. After that, the penthouse changed. Or maybe Nora finally saw it clearly. The windows were not windows anymore. They were walls with a view. The security guards were not staff. They were warnings. The elevator that opened only with Mason's approval was not luxury. It was control dressed in polished steel. She tried to make him talk. Not once. Not gently. Not only when she was sad. She tried for months. At dinner. In bed. In the back of his town car. On Sunday mornings when the city was quiet and he looked almost like the man she had fallen in love with. Every time Mason gave her pieces of truth so small they felt like insults. "It's business. It's handled. You're safer not knowing." Those words became the sound of their marriage dying. One night, 6 months before the divorce, Nora found him in the study. He was standing by the window with a glass of bourbon in his hand, the city burning gold beneath him. She watched him for a while before speaking. "Do you ever think about having a family?" Mason did not turn around. The silence lasted long enough for her to wish she had swallowed the question. Then he said, "Why would I do that?" Nora's breath caught. She tried to laugh, but the sound broke before it became anything real. That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters. She stepped closer. I am asking if you ever imagined children. A house that feels lived in. Someone running down the hallway. Someone with your eyes. His jaw tightened. Children are targets. Nora stared at him. He finally looked at her, and there was no cruelty in his face. That almost made it worse. He looked honest. Tired. Certain. In my world, family is leverage, he said. Anyone I love becomes a weapon someone else can use. And what am I? His eyes softened, but his voice did not. The reason I keep my distance. That sentence stayed in her chest for months. She replayed it when he came home late. She replayed it when he touched her like he loved her, then shut her out before morning. She replayed it in the lawyer's office when she signed the divorce papers with hands that refused to shake. Mason sat across from her at the long conference table in a dark suit, his face unreadable. His attorney spoke for him. Nora's attorney spoke for her. 2 years of marriage became property division confidentiality clauses, account transfers, and signatures on cream-colored paper. When it was over, Mason walked her to the elevator. For a moment, they were alone. The hallway smelled like leather and rain. He looked down at her as if he wanted to say something that might change everything. Nora waited. Mason said, "You'll be safer away from me." She almost hated him for how much that hurt. That is the first honest thing you have said to me in months. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. He did not follow. Nora moved to Portland with 1 suitcase, 2 boxes of law books, and enough pride to pretend she was not broken. Portland did not know Mason Cross. That was what she loved about it. There were no men in dark suits holding doors open for her. No private drivers, no reporters pretending not to take pictures, no whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Just gray skies, wet sidewalks, coffee shops, old brick buildings, and an apartment with uneven floors above a bakery that made the whole place smell like warm bread at dawn. She found work at a small corporate law firm near the river. The salary was nothing compared to what she had left behind, but every dollar was hers. Every key on her ring opened a door she chose. Every night she came home, she locked her own deadbolt and slept without wondering whose blood was on her husband's shirt. Then, 4 weeks after the divorce, she got sick in the middle of a client meeting. At first, she blamed stress, then bad coffee, then the smell of someone's tuna sandwich in the office break room. By Friday, she was sitting on the tile floor of her bathroom staring at 2 pink lines on a drugstore pregnancy test while rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. Her first thought was Mason. Not fear, not anger. Mason. She saw his face with a baby in his arms before she could stop herself. She imagined him staring down at a child with his dark eyes and serious mouth. She imagined that cold control cracking open under the weight of something small and helpless. Then she remembered his voice. Children are targets. Family is leverage. Her hand went to her stomach. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and her own breathing. She picked up her phone. Mason's number was still there. She had not been brave enough to delete it yet. Her thumb hovered over the screen. All she had to do was call. He would answer. Mason always answered when something mattered. Maybe he would be angry. Maybe he would come to Portland. Maybe he would put her in a safer apartment, hire doctors, send guards, take over before she had time to breathe. Maybe the baby would never have a normal day. Nora saw security cameras in a nursery, men with guns outside a playground, a childhood measured by threat levels. Mason making decisions with that calm voice calling it protection every time he took away another piece of her freedom. She deleted his number. Then she sat on the floor and cried into a towel so the neighbors would not hear. "I am sorry," she whispered, one hand pressed flat beneath her ribs. "I am so sorry, but I am choosing you." Pregnancy made Nora's life smaller and sharper. She worked until her ankles swelled under her desk. She took extra contract reviews on weekends. She bought second-hand baby clothes from neighborhood mothers and pretended she did not mind when they asked where her husband was. She learned which grocery store marked down produce after 8 at night. She learned how to sleep sitting up when heartburn burned her throat. She learned that loneliness was not always loud. Sometimes it was a crib assembled by one person at midnight with a screwdriver, swollen hands, and instructions that made no sense. When Eli was born, everything changed in one breath. He came into the world screaming, furious, red-faced, alive. Nora held him against her bare chest and felt the entire shape of her life rearrange itself around his heartbeat. He had Mason's hair. That was the first thing she noticed. Thick, dark, impossible to smooth down. Then his mouth. Then, weeks later, his eyes. Deep brown, watchful, too serious for a baby. Sometimes in the dim blue light before dawn, when Eli stared up at her from the crook of her arm, Nora felt love so fierce it frightened her. She also felt guilt. It sat beside the love like a shadow that would not leave. "You are mine," she whispered to him. "You are safe." But safe was expensive. Daycare cost more than her first apartment after law school. Formula emptied her bank account faster than she could fill it. Medical co-pays arrived in envelopes she stopped opening right away because fear had become something she needed to schedule. Her firm acted supportive until Eli got his first ear infection, and she had to miss 2 mornings in 1 week. After that, her supervisor began saying things like team reliability and long-term fit. Nora learned to smile while panic moved under her skin. She learned to carry Eli a diaper bag, her laptop, and 3 kinds of exhaustion up 4 flights of stairs when the elevator broke. She learned that motherhood was not one sacrifice. It was 1,000 small ones made before breakfast, made without applause, made because a tiny hand reached for her, and nothing else mattered. The night Eli got sick started like any other bad Friday. The office had been tense. A partner sent back a contract with red marks and a comment that read, "Please review more carefully next time." Daycare called at 4:30 to say Eli seemed fussy. The rain began before Nora left work and followed her home in cold sheets. By the time she reached the apartment, Eli was hot against her chest. At first, she told herself it was a normal fever. Babies got fevers. Babies cried. Babies recovered. She gave him medicine. She changed him into soft pajamas. She walked him around the apartment, bouncing gently, humming a song her mother used to sing before the car accident that left Nora alone at 24. Eli did not settle. His cry thinned. Then he went quiet. That silence did what no cry could do. It terrified her. The thermometer beeped. 103.2. Nora stared at the number, then at her son's flushed face. "No," she said, as if refusing it could lower the fever. "No baby." The pediatrician's office went to voicemail. Her best friend Paige did not answer the first call, then called back while Nora was already stuffing diapers wipes, a bottle insurance cards, and a half-packed panic into Eli's bag. "Take him to the emergency room," Paige said the second she heard Nora's voice. "I do not know if I am overreacting." "You are not. Go now." Nora went. She drove through Portland in the storm with one hand on the wheel and one hand reaching backward. She ran a red light, then another. When she pulled up to Mercy West Medical Center, she left the car crooked near the emergency entrance and carried Eli through the rain. That was where the night from the beginning of this story caught up with her. The doctors, the fever, the word meningitis, the question about the father, the name she had buried, Mason Cross. After the call, everything in the hospital felt too bright. Nora sat in the family waiting room in clothes still damp from the rain. A vending machine hummed in the corner. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried. Nurses moved quickly past the open door with the practiced urgency of people who knew fear had to wait its turn. Dr. Amelia Price returned after the lumbar puncture. She looked tired but not defeated. That gave Nora enough air to stand. "He is stable," the doctor said. Nora covered her mouth with both hands. "We have started antibiotics while we wait for the cultures. His fever is still high, but his vitals are holding. You can see him for a few minutes." Nora followed her through a maze of hallways that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Eli looked impossibly small in the hospital crib. Someone had changed him into a tiny gown printed with blue whales. An IV line ran from his hand. A monitor blinked beside him, turning his life into numbers and sound. Nora approached slowly. The moment she touched his fingers, Eli curled around her thumb. She bent over the crib and pressed her lips to his warm forehead. "I am here," she whispered. "Mommy is here." But for the first time since he was born, that did not feel like enough. She looked at the door. Mason was coming. The thought moved through her like cold water. She had imagined seeing him again so many times that the versions blurred together. In some, she was strong. In others, he was cruel. Sometimes he begged. Sometimes she did. Sometimes he never found out at all, and Eli grew up with only half his story. None of those imagined moments had included a hospital crib, a spinal tap, and their child fighting an infection under fluorescent lights. Nora stayed beside Eli until a nurse touched her arm and told her they needed space to work. Back in the waiting room, Paige called again. Nora stared at the screen. She could not answer. How could she explain that the secret Paige had begged her to tell was now racing toward Portland in a private helicopter? How could she explain that part of her was relieved? Not because she trusted Mason. Because Mason Cross did not lose things. Not companies, not territory, not fights. And now, he knew Eli existed. Close to midnight, the hospital changed. Nora felt it before she understood it. The air tightened. Conversations dipped. A security guard near the entrance straightened. An administrator hurried past the waiting room with a clipboard clutched to her chest. Then came the sound. A heavy rhythmic chopping above the storm. Nora stood. The windows trembled. Outside, through rain, blurred glass lights swept across the roofline as a helicopter descended onto the medical center landing pad. No one had to tell her. Mason had arrived. The elevator doors opened 7 minutes later. Mason Cross stepped out as if the hospital belonged to him, and he had come to collect something stolen. He wore a black overcoat over a charcoal suit. Rain darkened his hair at the temples. His face was the same and not the same, sharper than she remembered, colder. But beneath the controls, something moved in his eyes that looked almost like fear. 3 men followed him. One carried a leather medical bag. One spoke quietly into a phone. The third scanned every hallway, every camera, every person who looked too long. Mason did not look at them. He looked at Nora. For 15 months she had trained herself not to remember the exact weight of his gaze. It found her anyway. He crossed the hall in long, silent strides. Nora's body remembered him before her mind could object. The cedar scent of his cologne. The way he stopped close enough to unsettle her, but not close enough to touch. The scar near his jaw from a fight he had never explained. Nora. Her name sounded different in his mouth now, less like love, more like evidence. "Mason," she said. His eyes moved over her damp blouse, the hospital bracelet on her wrist, the exhaustion beneath her eyes. Then his gaze dropped to the pediatric room behind her. "Where is my son?" The words hit with brutal force. "My son. Not the baby. Not Eli. My son. He is sleeping," Nora said. "The doctors are monitoring him. I asked where." The old command in his voice sparked something in her even through the fear. And I answered as his mother. Mason's eyes returned to hers. For 1 second the hallway seemed to disappear. They were back in Chicago, standing on opposite sides of every locked door he had built between them. "Doctor," Price arrived before either could say something that could not be taken back. "Mr. Cross," she said, "I am Dr. Amelia Price." Mason turned toward her and the fury became polished control. "How is he stable? We are treating aggressively while we wait for confirmation. Your medical history helped us narrow several concerns. My physician will consult with you." Dr. Price's expression did not change. "I am happy to speak with him, but Eli is my patient." For the first time that night, Nora almost smiled. Mason noticed. Of course he did. The doctor led them to Eli's room. Mason stopped at the doorway. Nora watched the moment land. Eli lay sleeping beneath a thin blanket, one small hand wrapped in gauze for the IV. His dark hair stuck up in wild curls. His lashes rested against fever-flushed cheeks. Even sick, even pale, he looked so much like Mason that the truth did not need papers. Mason gripped the doorframe. His knuckles whitened. The men behind him fell back without being told. Nora stood beside him, afraid to breathe. Mason stepped into the room like he was entering a church after years of forgetting how to pray. He approached the crib slowly. All that power, all that violence, all that city-bred control narrowed into one shaking breath. He reached down and placed one finger against Eli's palm. Eli stirred. His tiny fingers closed around Mason's finger. Mason closed his eyes. For a moment, the hospital machines, the storm, the anger, the 15 months, all of it seemed to fall away. "Hey, little man," Mason whispered. His voice broke on the last word. Nora looked away because seeing him hurt was worse than she expected. Mason did not take his eyes off Eli. "I am your father," he said so softly. Nora almost missed it. "And I am sorry I am late." Nora's throat tightened. The apology was not for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was real. Mason stood there for a long time. His finger caught in Eli's fist, his face stripped bare in a way Nora had never seen during their marriage. She had begged for honesty in Chicago. She had begged for a door to open. Now in a hospital room, 3,000 miles from the life she had fled, Mason Cross finally looked like a man with something to lose. Dr. Price checked the monitor and spoke quietly with Mason's physician. Nurses came and went. The storm softened outside. Nora sank into the chair by the wall, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Mason remained beside the crib. After a while he spoke without looking at her. "When was he born?" Nora swallowed. "March 16th. Mason's jaw moved once. "What time?" 4:27 in the morning. "Was it hard?" The question surprised her. She looked at him. His eyes were still on Eli, but his face had gone tight as if he already hated the answer. "Yes," she said honestly. "It was hard." "Were you alone?" Nora looked down at her hands. Paige got there near the end. Mason absorbed that in silence. The monitor beeped steadily. Finally, he said, "I should have been there." Nora's voice came out tired and rough. "You made me believe you would never want to be." Mason turned then. Anger flashed through the grief. "I said children were dangerous in my world. I never said I would abandon my own. You said family was leverage. It is. That is not exactly comforting." His eyes darkened. "No. It is true." The room cooled around them. Eli shifted in his sleep, and both of them looked down at him at the same time. That small movement ended the argument before it could begin. Mason lowered his voice. "We are not doing this here." Nora almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because even now, bleeding fear into a hospital room, Mason still sounded like a man setting terms. "No," she said. "We are not." He looked back at Eli. His finger was still held in that tiny fist. The first battle between them did not begin in a courtroom. It began there, under the soft beep of a monitor, with their son asleep between them, and the past standing in the room like a loaded gun. For the next 3 weeks, Mason Cross did not leave Portland. At first, Nora thought it was pride. Men like Mason did not walk away from something that belonged to them. They stayed until the room bent around their will. They made calls. They moved money. They made impossible things happen so quietly that the rest of the world mistook it for luck. But by the 4th night in the pediatric unit, Nora stopped being able to lie to herself. Mason was not there for control alone. He was there because Eli had wrapped one fever-hot hand around his finger and ruined him. Nora saw it in pieces. The first morning, Mason stood beside Eli's crib while Dr. Price explained the antibiotic schedule. He asked questions so precise that even the doctor paused before answering. Not because he was challenging her, though. Nora could tell he was used to challenging everyone. He was listening. Truly listening. Every dosage, every risk, every possible complication went into him like evidence he intended to keep forever. The second day, Eli woke crying hoarse and exhausted, his little body still weak from fever. Nora moved first, but Mason was closer. He looked at her, once uncertain in a way she had never seen before. "Can I?" Nora almost said no. The word rose in her throat from habit, from fear, from 15 months of doing everything alone. Then Eli cried again. She nodded. Mason bent over the crib with the caution of a man handling glass. He slid one large hand beneath Eli's neck, the other under his bottom, and lifted him awkwardly against his chest. Eli fussed, then turned his face into Mason's shirt and quieted. Mason froze. Nora watched his expression shift, the cold mask cracking under the shock of being needed. "He likes pressure," she said softly. "Hold him close. Not too loose." Mason adjusted, careful and immediate. Eli sighed. That sound hit Mason harder than any bullet could have. Nora saw it. The slight flinch, the way his jaw tightened, the way he looked down at the baby, as if someone had placed his own heart outside his body and dared the world to touch it. By the end of the first week, Mason knew the nurses by name. He knew which monitor alarm meant movement and which one meant a nurse would come running. He knew Eli hated the digital thermometer but tolerated the soft blue blanket from home. He learned to warm bottles, to check the temperature against his wrist, to change diapers with a seriousness that made one of the nurses hide a smile behind her clipboard. One afternoon, Nora found him sitting in the stiff hospital chair with Eli sleeping on his chest. Mason's suit jacket was folded over the back of the chair. His tie was gone. There was a pale smear of formula near his collar. He looked up when she entered. What, he asked? Nothing. You are staring. You have spit up on a $500 shirt. His eyes dropped to the stain. Then he looked back at Eli. Worth it. The words were quiet, almost careless. They were not careless at all. Nora stepped into the room and sat beside the crib. For a while, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped against the window. Down the hall, a child laughed at something on a tablet. Eli breathed slowly against Mason's chest, one fist curled into the fabric of his shirt. Nora hated how peaceful it looked. She hated that it looked right. When Eli was finally discharged, the hospital lobby felt too bright. Nora signed papers with a tired hand while Mason's private physician spoke to Dr. Price in low voices. Mason stood near the door, holding Eli's car seat as if it contained something sacred. Nora expected him to hand it to her when they reached the curb. He did not. "My car is waiting," he said. "So is mine." Mason glanced toward her old silver sedan parked under a wet maple tree. That car should not be carrying groceries, let alone my son. Nora's spine straightened. It carried him here when he needed help. The words struck exactly where she meant them to. Mason looked at her, then at the car, then back at Eli. After a moment, he said, "Fine. I will follow you. You do not need to follow me." "Yes," he said. "I do." He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. Nora drove home with Mason's black SUV behind her the entire way. Her apartment had never looked worse than it did when Mason Cross walked into it. The living room was too small for him. The ceiling stain above the window looked darker in the afternoon light. A laundry basket sat half full near the couch. There were bottles drying on a towel beside the sink. The stack of unopened bills on the counter suddenly seemed enormous. Mason noticed everything. Of course he did. Nora set Eli's carrier on the floor and began unbuckling him. "Do not start," she said. "I have not said anything. You are looking. I have eyes. You have judgment." Mason removed his overcoat slowly and placed it over the back of a chair. The gesture was too comfortable, too domestic, and it made Nora's nerves spark. "I have concern," he said. Nora lifted Eli into her arms. "We have been doing fine." Mason looked at her then. Not cruelly. That would have been easier. He looked tired. "You were one fever away from choosing between a hospital bill and your son's life." Her face flushed. "That is not fair." "No," Mason said. "It is not. But it is true." Eli stirred against her shoulder and Nora lowered her voice. "You do not get to walk in after missing everything and decide my life is inadequate." Mason's eyes darkened. "I did not miss everything. It was taken from me." The room went still. Nora felt the words enter her like cold air. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to say she had been scared, that she had done what she thought was right, that he had made it impossible to trust him with anything fragile. All of that was true. So was what he had said. Mason reached into a leather folder one of his men had carried inside and placed several documents on the coffee table. Nora stared at them. "What is that DNA confirmation?" "Eli's updated medical records, my financial disclosures, a custody assessment from an attorney in Oregon and another in Illinois." The blood drained from her face. "You had lawyers prepare this while our son was in the hospital." "Our son was in the hospital because I did not know he existed." Nora held Eli tighter. Mason's gaze flicked to the movement, and something in his expression softened, then hardened again. "I can file for emergency custody," he said. "You concealed paternity. You failed to notify me during a medical crisis until you had no choice. Your financial situation is unstable. Your support system here is limited. I can provide medical care security and resources you cannot." Nora's voice shook. "You are threatening to take him from me. I am telling you what my lawyers can do. That is the same thing when it comes from you." Mason said nothing. That silence was worse than denial. Eli made a small sound, his fingers opening and closing against Nora's blouse. She kissed the top of his head because she needed a second before the room tilted under her. "You cannot just take my baby," she whispered. Mason's jaw tightened. "He is not only your baby." There it was. The truth neither of them could escape. Nora sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Her knees felt weak. Mason remained standing for a moment, then seemed to realize how he looked. Too tall. Too powerful. Too much like a man delivering a sentence. He lowered himself into the chair across from her. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I do not want Eli growing up without you." Nora looked at him through angry tears. "That is generous. I mean it. Then why bring custody papers into my home? Because you need to understand the stakes." "I understand them. You think money makes you the better parent?" "No. I think protection matters. You mean control. I mean survival." The argument had nowhere to go because both of them were speaking from old wounds. Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Come to Chicago." Nora laughed once. It sounded hollow even to her. "No. Hear me out. I heard you for 2 years." It was always the same speech with different lighting. His eyes flashed, but he held his temper. "Gold Coast apartment, 3 bedrooms, full security. Eli will be under the care of a pediatric practice affiliated with Northwestern. I will establish a trust in his name. You can work for Cross Harbor Group as legal counsel. Corporate compliance contracts import law. Clean work." "Clean?" Nora repeated. "Yes. With you, for my legitimate businesses. That word is doing a lot of heavy lifting." Mason's mouth twitched, but there was no humor in his eyes. "You are good at what you do. Better than half the attorneys I pay too much to miss obvious problems. I would pay you what you are worth. You want to put me on your payroll. I want you close enough to protect. There it is. Nora. No, Mason. Do not make it sound noble. You want Eli in your world, and you want me where you can see me." "Yes." The honesty stopped her. Mason did not look away. "Yes," he said again. "I want my son where I can protect him. I want his mother where no one can use her to reach him. I want the 7 months I lost to be the last thing you ever keep from me." Nora looked down at Eli. He was awake now, blinking slowly, his fever gone, but his body still tired from the fight. Chicago meant danger. Portland meant struggle. Mason meant both. That night after Mason left with 2 of his men posted outside her building despite her objections, Nora called Paige. Her best friend answered on the first ring. "Tell me you are not alone with him." Nora sat on the bathroom floor with the shower running so the guards in the hallway could not hear. "He wants me to move to Chicago." Paige went silent for half a second. "Absolutely not. He is threatening custody. He is Mason Cross. Of course he is threatening custody. That man probably threatens parking meters." Nora almost smiled, then covered her mouth as the laugh turned into something too close to a sob. Paige's voice softened. "Oh, Nora, I am so tired. I know. No, Paige, I do not think you do. I am tired in places sleep does not reach. I am tired of bills and daycare and pretending I am not scared every time Eli coughs. I am tired of being the only person standing between him and the world. And you think Mason is safe?" Nora closed her eyes. "I think Mason is dangerous." "Good. Hold on to that. I also think he loves Eli." Paige sighed. "Dangerous men can love. That is what makes them dangerous in a different way." Nora pressed her forehead against her knees. "When he held him, Paige, I saw it. He was not pretending. I believe you." That surprised her. "You do?" "Yes. I believe he loves his son. I also believe he will call control protection until you forget the difference." Nora said nothing. The shower hissed beside her. Paige continued quieter now. "You left him because you disappeared inside that marriage. Do not walk back into it because he finally showed you the part of himself you always wanted to see. I do not know what to do. You make terms, real ones. You get them in writing. You do not let guilt sign anything for you." Nora wiped her face. "And if he refuses, then you fight, and I will come there and fight with you." The next evening, Mason returned at 6 exactly. Nora had spent the day writing conditions on the back of an overdue electric bill while Eli napped. Every line felt both too small and too enormous. Mason entered carrying coffee she had not asked for and a soft gray stuffed elephant for Eli. Nora glanced at it. "Bribery strategy. At least you are honest." "Only with you, apparently." The answer landed between them. For a moment she saw the old intimacy flicker the dangerous ease they had once shared before. Secrets made every room colder. She forced herself to look away. "We need to talk." Mason set the coffee on the counter and waited. Nora stood in the middle of the living room, Eli balanced on her hip. She had dressed for courage in the only way she could manage. Black pants, white blouse, hair tied back, no makeup except enough to hide the shadows under her eyes. "If I come to Chicago, these are the terms." Mason's gaze dropped to the paper in her hand. "You made a list. I was married to you. I know better than to improvise." Something almost like pride touched his face. "Read it." Nora took a breath. "Joint legal custody. Equal say in medical care, education, travel, and anything involving Eli's safety." "Agreed." She blinked. She had expected a fight. "My work stays legal. Fully legal. I will not review fake contracts, shell companies, suspicious transfers, or anything that puts me at risk." "Agreed. I keep my own bank account." "Of course. I choose my own attorney before signing anything final." "Smart." She narrowed her eyes. "Do not praise me like I am one of your employees. You are negotiating well." "Mason." He lifted one hand slightly. "Continue. I can speak to Paige whenever I want. No monitoring my personal calls." His face gave nothing away. "Agreed. And you do not lie to me about threats involving Eli." That one changed the room. Mason looked toward the window where rain moved over the glass in thin silver lines. "Nora." "No. That is the term. If someone is watching us, if someone threatens him, if your world gets close to my child, I hear it from you. Not from a man at the door, not from a headline, not from blood on your shirt." His eyes returned to hers. The memory of that night in the bathroom passed between them. "Agreed," he said. Nora looked down at the final line. Her mouth went dry. "And if I decide I need to leave, you do not stop me." Mason went still. The apartment seemed to shrink around them. With Eli, he asked, "Yes. No." The answer came too quickly. Nora's fingers tightened around the paper. "Then everything before that means nothing. It means I will respect you until your decision puts my son in danger." "Our son." "Our son," he corrected, voice lower. "And if you run with him again, I will come after you." Nora felt the words like a hand around her throat. Mason stood, then stopped himself from stepping closer. "I will not apologize for that. At least you are honest. You asked me not to lie. I asked you not to cage me. I am trying to keep you alive." "No," she said, anger rising through the fear. "You are trying to make sure you never feel powerless again." That struck him. For the first time, Mason looked away. Eli babbled softly, reaching for the stuffed elephant on the counter. Nora handed it to him, grateful for the distraction because her own hands were shaking. Mason's voice was quieter when he spoke. "You think I felt powerful in that hospital?" Nora looked at him. He met her eyes. "I walked into that room and saw my son connected to machines. I did not know his birthday. I did not know his middle name. I did not know what song calmed him down. I could not fix it with money. I could not threaten it into going away. I was a stranger to my own child." His control cracked just enough for her to see the grief underneath. "You did that to me, Nora." Her eyes filled. "I know." The admission cost her. Mason heard it. The anger in his face shifted, not gone, but less sharp. "I should have told you," she said, "but you should have given me one reason to believe my child would have a life with you that was not built behind bulletproof glass." Mason closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was tired. "I cannot promise normal. I know. I cannot promise danger will never touch him. I know that too. I can promise that if it does, it goes through me first." Nora hated that the promise comforted her. She hated that part of her believed no wall in the world was safer than Mason Cross standing between Eli and harm. She placed the paper on the coffee table. "I will come to Chicago on a temporary agreement. 3 months. During that time, we finalize custody with both attorneys present. I work legal only. I keep my independence. You do not threaten to take Eli from me again unless I actually endanger him." Mason studied her. "And if after 3 months you want to leave, we discuss it through lawyers." His jaw tightened. "That is not a promise I will let you go." "No," Nora said. "It is a promise I will not disappear." That mattered to him. She saw it. Mason nodded once. 3 months. The agreement did not feel like peace. It felt like a ceasefire signed in a room full of ghosts. 2 days later, Nora packed her apartment. There was not much to pack, which hurt more than she expected. Eli's clothes filled one suitcase. Her own filled another. Books went into cardboard boxes from the bakery downstairs. She wrapped the cheap blue mug Paige had given her in a towel and tucked it between legal texts. Mason's men moved quietly through the apartment, efficient and careful. Nora hated them touching her life, but she was too tired to carry everything herself. Mason arrived near noon. He wore no tie that day. Eli, perched on Nora's hip, reached for him before Nora could stop it. Mason's face changed. Nora handed him over. "Traitor," she whispered to Eli. Eli grabbed Mason's collar and laughed. Mason looked down at him, and the soft expression that crossed his face made Nora turn away. She walked into the bedroom to check the closet one last time. Empty. The word echoed in her. This apartment had been hard, lonely, too small, too cold in winter, too hot in summer. But it had been hers. She had become a mother here. She had cried here. She had sung Eli to sleep here. She had survived here. Mason appeared in the doorway with Eli in his arms. "We can wait another day," he said. Nora shook her head. "If I wait, I might change my mind." "I know." The gentleness in his voice almost undid her. She picked up Eli's first onesie from the dresser, the tiny white one with faded yellow stars. It had been too big on him when she brought him home from the hospital after he was born. She pressed it to her face for 1 second. Then she folded it and placed it in the bag. Mason watched without speaking. That restraint was new. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sidewalk shone under a pale gray sky. 2 black SUVs waited by the curb. Nora locked the apartment door and held the key in her palm. For a moment, she could not let go. Then she slipped it through the mail slot for the landlord and turned toward the stairs. Mason carried Eli down ahead of her. At the curb, Nora paused. Portland moved around her in ordinary ways. A cyclist passed with a paper cup of coffee in one hand. A dog barked from an apartment window. The bakery downstairs opened its door, sending warm air and the smell of cinnamon into the street. Normal life continued. Nora stood on the edge of it holding a diaper bag and the remains of a life she had built to keep her son hidden. Mason secured Eli into the car seat himself. He checked the straps twice. Then he stepped back and looked at Nora across the open door. "You can ride with him," he said. "I plan to." "I know. I just wanted you to hear me offer." That was new, too. Nora climbed into the back seat beside Eli. Mason closed the door gently. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Nora looked back at her building until it disappeared behind the corner. Eli kicked his feet and hugged the gray elephant Mason had brought him. Ahead of them, the road stretched east. Chicago waited with its glass towers, old wounds, locked gates, and the man who had once broken her heart now sitting in the front seat, turning slightly every few minutes to make sure their son was still breathing. Chicago did not welcome Nora back. It watched her. The skyline rose ahead of the SUV in hard silver lines cutting into a pale afternoon sky. Lake Michigan flashed between buildings, cold and endless, the same blue-gray as Mason's eyes when he was trying not to feel anything. Nora sat in the back seat beside Eli, one hand resting lightly on his blanket, while the city she had escaped spread around her like a memory with teeth. Eli slept through most of it. His little mouth hung open. The gray, stuffed elephant was tucked under one arm, already damp at the ear from chewing. Every few minutes, Mason turned from the front passenger seat to check on him. He did it quietly, as if hoping Nora would not notice. She noticed everything. The driver who never looked in the rearview mirror unless Mason spoke. The second SUV behind them always 2 car lengths back. The way traffic seemed to open around them near the Gold Coast, as if even strangers knew not to slow Mason Cross down. When they pulled into the underground garage of a limestone tower near the lake, Nora felt her stomach tighten. "This is temporary," she said, before Mason could open her door. He looked at her through the glass. "Yes. You remember what temporary means?" His mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile. "I own several dictionaries." "Mason." The almost smile disappeared. He opened the door and leaned in, his voice low enough that only she could hear. 3 months. Attorneys. Written terms. I remember. Nora studied him for a second, looking for the trap beneath the calm. She had spent 2 years decoding Mason's silences, but this version of him was harder to read. He was still controlled, still dangerous, still a man who moved through the world like every room had already surrendered. But when Eli stirred, Mason's attention broke from Nora instantly. That was new. He unbuckled their son with careful hands, lifting him from the car seat before Eli could fully wake. Eli blinked, saw him, and made a sleepy sound of recognition. Mason froze for half a breath. Then he tucked Eli closer against his chest. "Hey, little man," he murmured. "We're home." Nora stepped out of the car. "Not home," she said. Mason looked at her. The apartment, he corrected. That was new too. The elevator opened directly into the unit on the 29th floor. Nora hated it immediately. Not because it was ugly. It was beautiful in the way expensive things were beautiful when no one asked whether they should feel warm. Pale oak floors, cream walls, a kitchen with marble counters and hidden appliances, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling showing the lake on one side and the city on the other. 3 bedrooms, a nursery already painted soft green with a crib assembled, drawers filled, diapers stacked, and a mobile of little wooden clouds turning gently in the air. Nora stood in the doorway of the nursery and went cold. You had this ready. Mason was behind her with Eli still in his arms. Yes. When? While he was in the hospital. She turned slowly. So, while I was sleeping in a plastic chair, you were furnishing a nursery in Chicago. His jaw tightened. I was preparing for my son to have a place to sleep. You were preparing to win. Mason did not answer quickly. That told her the accusation had landed close enough to truth. I prepare for every possible outcome, he said. Nora stepped into the nursery. Her fingers brushed the edge of a tiny blue sweater folded in the top drawer. It was softer than anything she had ever bought Eli. Too soft. Too perfect. She hated that part of her wanted him to have it. He is not an outcome, she said. I know that. Do you? Mason shifted Eli to his other arm. I am trying, Nora. There was enough strain in his voice that she looked back at him. Trying. That word did not belong to the Mason she had left. That Mason did not try. He decided. He commanded. He closed doors and called it mercy. Eli reached for the wooden clouds above the crib. Mason moved closer so he could touch them. The baby smiled. For a moment, the argument thinned. They spent the first week learning the shape of their new life and cutting themselves on its edges. Nora worked at the dining table during Eli's naps, reviewing contracts Mason's office sent over, import agreements, insurance terms, vendor disputes, shipping compliance. The documents were legitimate, which almost made her more suspicious. She searched for hidden language-coded transfers, fake entities, anything that smelled like the life Mason never admitted to. At night, she checked the windows, not for the view, for reflections. Men stood outside the building at all hours. Some were Masons. She learned to recognize them by posture. Still shoulders, clean suits, eyes that moved constantly without seeming to move at all. They opened doors, stood near elevators, changed shifts without speaking. Then there were others. A man in a brown leather jacket who appeared across the street 3 mornings in a row. A black sedan that idled too long near the service entrance. A woman with red hair who sat in the lobby twice without visiting anyone. Nora told herself she was imagining things. Fear did that. It gave every stranger a weapon. But on the 8th day, she took Eli to a small park 2 blocks away because he was restless and the apartment had begun to feel like a beautiful box. Mason had sent 2 guards with her. They stayed far enough not to crowd her close enough that she could feel them. Eli sat in the baby swing bundled in a navy jacket, laughing whenever Nora pushed him gently. The sound loosened something in her chest. For 10 minutes, she almost felt like an ordinary mother. Then she saw the men across the street, 3 of them. They were not dressed like Mason's security. No suits, no earpieces. One leaned against a brick wall smoking. Another pretended to check his phone. The third watched Eli without pretending anything at all. He had a tattoo behind his left ear, a black crown wrapped in thorns. Nora's hands went still on the swing chain. Eli kicked his feet, wanting another push. One of Mason's guards stepped closer. Mrs. Whitaker. She hated the name in his mouth, hated that he saw her fear before she could hide it. "We're leaving," she said. The guard followed her gaze. His expression did not change, but his hand moved inside his jacket. The 3 men across the street smiled. Not at him. At Nora. She lifted Eli from the swing too fast, making him fuss, and held him against her chest as she walked back to the apartment. Her spine prickled the entire way. Every passing car sounded too loud. Every open doorway looked like a mouth. By the time the elevator doors closed behind her upstairs, her hands were shaking. Mason arrived at 6 that evening. He always arrived at 6 now. No matter how many meetings, calls, shipments, or fires burned in the parts of his life she did not see, he appeared in Eli's doorway at 6 with his sleeves rolled up and his attention already shifting from empire to child. Eli had begun to expect it. The moment Mason entered, he squealed and slapped both hands on the floor, crawling toward him with wild determination. Mason caught him and lifted him high enough to make him laugh. "There he is," Mason said, and for 1 second his face went unguarded. Nora waited until Eli was settled with a soft block in the middle of the rug. There were men at the park today. Mason's hand stilled on Eli's back. He did not look at her right away. "Mine, no." "Describe them." She did. The leather jacket. The smoker. The man with the black crown tattoo. Mason's eyes went empty. That was how Nora knew. He took out his phone and typed with one hand, fast, silent. Eli grabbed at the screen and Mason moved it out of reach without looking down. "Mason, do not go back to that park. Who were they?" He sent another message. "Mason." This time he looked at her. For a moment she saw him making the old calculation. How much truth to give. How much to hide. How much control he could keep if he chose silence. Nora's voice hardened. "You promised." Something shifted in his face. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and picked Eli up, holding him against one shoulder. "The Valdez Cartel," he said. The name seemed to darken the room. Nora swallowed. "You told me they were a problem with shipping routes." "They are. Those men were watching my son at a park. They know about him now." The words landed like ice. Eli patted Mason's cheek, babbling softly, unaware that the world had just narrowed around him. How, Nora asked. Mason walked to the windows and looked down at the street far below. "When I flew to Portland, I broke patterns I had kept in place for years. I moved a medical team. I chartered through channels I normally keep separate. I showed urgency. Men like Valdez survive by noticing urgency. So your enemies followed you to us. His shoulders tightened. Yes, Nora wanted to throw something. At him. At the window. At the world he had dragged behind him like smoke. You said coming here would make Eli safer. It does. They found him. And if you had stayed in Portland, they would have found him without me standing between them and his crib. She hated that. Hated the brutal sense of it. Mason, I cannot raise him like this. He turned. Eli had fallen quiet against him, one fist tangled in his shirt. No, Mason said. Not here. What does that mean? It means we move to Lake Forest. Nora laughed once because fear had no other exit. Of course you have another house, 40 acres, controlled access, private security, distance from public streets. A fortress. A home. With guards. With gates. With cameras. With our son. Alive inside. The room went silent. Nora looked at Eli. His eyelids were heavy now, his cheek pressed against Mason's shoulder. The anger in her had nowhere to go because beneath it was terror, and beneath the terror was the terrible knowledge that Mason might be right. They moved the next morning. Nora did not call Paige until the SUV was already passing north along Lakeshore Drive. She held the phone to her ear and watched the city slide past. Paige answered with no greeting. Where are you? In Chicago. I know that. Your texts have been suspiciously calm, which means everything is on fire. Nora closed her eyes. We are moving to Mason's estate in Lake Forest. Silence. Then Paige said very softly, Nora, there was surveillance at the park. By Mason's people. Paige cursed under her breath. Nora glanced toward the front seat. Mason was on a call, voice low, but she knew he could hear more than most people. She lowered her own voice anyway. I cannot explain everything right now. That sentence is never followed by anything healthy. I know. Are you safe? Nora looked at Mason. He had turned slightly, listening now, though his eyes stayed on the road ahead. I do not know how to answer that anymore. Paige's voice changed. Less anger. More fear. Then answer this. Can you leave if you need to? Nora looked out the window. The city gave way to quieter streets, then larger homes, then stone walls and black iron gates. I am still figuring that out. The Lake Forest estate appeared behind a wall of winter bare trees. The gate opened before the SUV stopped. Cameras turned in quiet black domes along the drive. Men stood near the entrance in wool coats, hands folded, eyes alert. The house itself rose from the property in pale stone and dark glass, elegant enough to belong in a magazine and severe enough to repel an army. Eli woke as they pulled up and began babbling at the trees. Mason opened Nora's door. She did not take his offered hand. His face gave nothing away, but he let the hand fall. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar-old books and expensive polish. It was warmer than she expected. A fire burned in the main room. The nursery was near Mason's suite, across from a bedroom prepared for Nora. Not in another wing. Not hidden away. Close enough that she could hear Eli if he cried. She did not know whether to be grateful or furious. As the days passed, the estate revealed itself in layers. There were panic buttons disguised as light switches, reinforced doors that closed too softly, security monitors hidden behind cabinet panels, a locked room in the basement Mason did not mention, a garden courtyard where Eli could crawl safely beneath the eyes of 4 cameras and 2 armed men pretending not to watch. Nora began to understand that wealth did not remove danger, it organized it. Her work continued. Mason's company sent more contracts. She read them in the library while Eli played on a blanket near her feet. The work was clean on paper, but Mason's world left fingerprints in the margins. A port schedule that changed too quickly, a vendor that existed only 6 months, a storage facility paid in cash through 3 layers of companies. She flagged what she could. Mason listened. Sometimes he pushed back. Sometimes she won. The first time he accepted one of her revisions without argument, she stared at him across his study. What he asked. "You hate being corrected." "I hate incompetence." This was not incompetence. That might be the closest thing to a compliment I get from you. His eyes moved over her face, lingering just long enough to warm the air. "You used to get better ones." Her pulse shifted. She looked down at the contract. "Those came with too many secrets." Mason said nothing. That was the thing about this version of him. Sometimes silence still meant evasion. Sometimes it meant he was learning not to defend the indefensible. Nora did not trust the difference yet. The burner phone came from a pharmacy in Evanston. She bought it during a trip to pick up diapers and baby lotion, one guard near the door and another by the car. She slipped the small box beneath a pack of wipes paid cash from money Mason had not given her, and hid it in the lining of her purse. She told herself it was for emergencies. The lie lasted until midnight. Eli was asleep. Mason was in a meeting downstairs. Nora sat on the bathroom floor with the shower running just like she had in Portland and searched the federal tip line for organized crime activity. Her first message was careful. Men with possible cartel ties observed near a child in Chicago Gold Coast area. Tattoo seen on one subject, black crown with thorns, possible Valdez connection. She expected nothing. The call came 2 days later. "Ms. Whitaker," a man said. "My name is Agent Caleb Monroe. I believe we should talk." They met at a small coffee shop near Northwestern on a morning when Mason thought she was visiting an attorney. Agent Monroe was not what she expected. He was not hard-eyed or dramatic. He wore a gray coat, ordered black coffee, and looked like the kind of man people forgot 5 minutes after passing him on the street. That made him more dangerous. He slid a photograph across the table. Nora looked down. Eli in the park swing. The image had been taken from across the street. Her son's face was circled in red. Her hand closed around the edge of the table. "Where did you get this?" From a phone recovered during a traffic stop involving known Valdez associates. Her mouth went dry. Monroe watched her carefully. "We have been building a case against Valdez for years. They are expanding through Midwest shipping channels. Mason Cross is one of the main obstacles." "You mean you are investigating him too?" "We investigate patterns. Mr. Cross is a pattern with excellent lawyers." Nora almost stood. Monroe lifted one hand slightly. "I am not asking you to hand us Mason Cross." "Good, because I would not." His eyes sharpened at that. "You still love him." Nora hated him for seeing it. "I am here because of my son." "Then listen as a mother. Valdez will not stop because your child is innocent. Innocence makes him useful. They will use him to pressure Cross or punish Cross or draw Cross into a mistake. We can help remove that threat." "How information? Names, cars, locations. Anything you hear connected to Valdez movement. You want me to spy inside Mason's house. I want you to survive the war already standing in your living room." Nora looked again at the photograph. Eli's tiny hands gripping the swing chains. His open mouth laughing. The red circle around his face. Something inside her went still. What happens if Mason finds out Monroe's answer came too smoothly? "Then you tell him you did what you had to do." Nora laughed softly without humor. "You have never been loved by a man like Mason Cross." Monroe held her gaze. "No, but I have buried women who were." She left without agreeing. That night, Mason found her in Eli's nursery. The baby had fallen asleep with one hand open beside his face. Nora sat in the rocking chair, still wearing her coat. Mason leaned against the doorway. "You saw your attorney?" "Yes." It was not fully a lie. She had seen her attorney first. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he let it pass. "He is breathing," Mason said. Nora looked up. "What, you keep checking his chest?" She looked back at Eli. "I know." Mason crossed the room slowly and crouched beside the chair, careful not to wake the baby. "I do it too." She turned to him. In the low nursery light, the hard lines of his face softened. He looked tired, not physically, though he probably was. Tired somewhere deeper. "I thought if I never had this," he said quietly, "I could never lose it." Nora's throat tightened. "And now?" His eyes moved to Eli. "Now I understand I was already losing something. I just did not know his name." The words opened a door in her chest she had been trying to hold shut. For a moment she wanted to tell him everything. Monroe. The photograph. The red circle around Eli's face. The burner phone hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her closet. Then Mason reached into the crib and touched 2 fingers lightly to Eli's blanket, as if proving to himself the child was still there. Nora stayed silent. After that, the double life began. She sent Monroe small things, a partial plate from a car that had circled the estate road twice, a name Mason cursed under his breath during a call, a reference to a warehouse outside Gary where Valdez men had been seen, nothing about Mason's legitimate operations, nothing that would put Cross Harbor Group directly in federal hands. At least that was what she told herself. But betrayal did not care how carefully it was measured. It still tasted the same. The more she lied, the more Mason changed. He came home earlier. He led her into meetings that involved security around Eli. He told her when threats shifted. He asked her opinion on moving funds into Eli's trust. He stopped saying "my son" when he was angry and began saying "our son" even when he was not. One evening, Eli took 3 wobbly steps between the coffee table and Mason's waiting hands. Nora gasped. Mason caught him just as he tipped forward, lifting him into the air while Eli shrieked with laughter. He walked Nora, said, half laughing, half crying. Mason looked at her over Eli's head, his face open with wonder. "We saw it. We." The word nearly undid her. Later, after Eli was asleep, Nora found Mason in the study pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. He offered her one. She took it but did not drink. "Do you still think family is leverage?" she asked. Mason looked into his glass. "Yes." Her face tightened. Then he added, "But I was wrong about what that means." She waited. "Leverage can be used against a man," he said. "It can also give him something to lift with." Nora looked away before he saw too much. The burner phone buzzed in her closet an hour later. She waited until Mason went downstairs. Monroe's message was short. "Need meeting details. Valdez planning direct contact with Cross. Timing matters." Nora stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Down the hall, Mason's voice drifted from Eli's room low and soft as he read a bedtime story about a rabbit who kept losing his way home. Eli babbled at him, delighted. Nora deleted the message, but her thumb shook when she did it. The next morning she found Mason in the courtyard with Eli balanced on his feet, teaching him how to walk across the winter grass. Mason looked up when he saw her. For once, there was no calculation in his expression, only something dangerously close to peace. Nora stood in the doorway with Monroe's warning still burning in her mind, watching the man she was beginning to love again hold the child she had betrayed him to protect. That peace lasted until the sky above the estate began to move. Nora saw the first drone from Eli's nursery window just after sunrise. At first it looked like a dark bird caught in the pale morning light, hovering above the tree line beyond the east fence. She stood with a clean diaper in one hand and Eli squirming on the changing table, half-dressed and impatient, while the small black shape held steady against the clouds. Then it shifted sideways without flapping. Nora's blood went cold. She scooped Eli into her arms before she even understood she was moving. The estate alarm did not scream. Nothing so dramatic happened. That was what made it worse. Somewhere beneath the quiet walls, the house simply changed. A lock clicked, then another. The hallway lights softened from warm gold to a low white glow. A voice came through the hidden speakers, calm and controlled. "Mrs. Whitaker, please remain inside the nursery." Eli laughed and grabbed at her necklace. Nora backed away from the window. Another drone appeared above the trees. Then a third. Small, black, patient, watching. Within seconds, men moved across the lawn below. Mason's men did not run. They flowed, each one taking a place already chosen long before this morning. 2 near the garden wall, 1 at the garage entrance, 3 along the west side of the house. Their coats opened just enough for Nora to see weapons. A sharp crack split the air. 1 drone dropped from the sky and vanished into the trees. Eli startled and began to cry. Nora pressed him to her chest, turning her body between him and the window. "It's okay," she whispered, though the words were lies and she knew he could not understand them anyway. "Mommy has you." Another crack. Another drone fell. The third rose higher, then darted away toward the lake road, fast and clever, like a thing escaping with what it had come to learn. The nursery door opened. Mason entered without knocking. He wore a dark shirt sleeves rolled to the forearms, his phone still in one hand. His eyes went first to Eli, then to Nora, then to the window. "Are you hurt? No. Did you go near the glass? No." He crossed the room and touched Eli's back, not taking him, just needing contact. Eli was still crying, his face red against Nora's shoulder. Mason's jaw flexed once. "They were testing response time," he said. Nora stared at him. "Those drones were over our son's nursery?" "Yes." "And that is all you have to say?" His eyes lifted to hers. Dark, steady, carrying too much. "No," he said. "But it is the part I can say without frightening you more." She laughed once, sharp and breathless. "You think I am not already frightened?" Mason reached for Eli then. Nora hesitated. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Pain flickered across his face there and gone. "Let me hold him," he said quietly. Not a command. A request. Nora handed Eli over. Mason tucked the baby against his chest, one large hand spread protectively across his back. Eli's cries softened into hiccups. He knew Mason now, knew his voice, his hands, the way he swayed without thinking. Nora hated how much that comforted her. Mason kissed the top of Eli's head and looked toward the window again. They are close enough to risk exposure. That means Valdez is done watching. Nora's mouth went dry. What do they want a meeting? Do not go. The words left her too quickly. Mason looked back. For a second something softened in his face. Not enough to change his mind. Just enough to show her he had heard what she was really saying. They asked for neutral ground. That sounds like a lie. It is. Then why would you walk into it? Because if I do not, they come closer to this house. To him. He looked down at Eli. The baby had settled, one fist curled into Mason's shirt, his lashes wet from crying. Nora stepped closer. There has to be another way. There are always other ways, Mason said. Most of them leave more bodies. The security room was on the lower level behind a door Nora had passed a dozen times without noticing. Mason opened it with his thumbprint and led her inside after Eli went down for his morning nap under guard. The room looked nothing like the rest of the house. No warm wood, no soft rugs. Just screens, maps, radios, locked cabinets, and men with tired eyes. Nora counted the camera feeds without meaning to. The front gate, the east fence, the garage, the nursery hallway, the courtyard, the tree line, the road beyond the property. Places she had walked through while pretending this house could be a home. Grant Hale stood at the central table, arms crossed over his chest. He was Mason's second, A broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with a scar through one eyebrow and the permanent expression of someone who expected betrayal before breakfast. He nodded once at Nora. "Mrs. Whitaker." "Nora," she said. Grant glanced at Mason. Mason said, "Call her Nora." Something passed between the men. Small, but not nothing. Grant tapped one of the screens. The image showed a muddy patch near the eastern fence. Tire tracks cut deep into the ground beyond the property line. They came in through the old service road, Grant said. Parked beyond the camera range, the drones were launched from there. Mason leaned over the table. "How long before we took down the first 38 seconds?" "Too slow." Grant's mouth tightened. They were above the nursery window for 9 seconds. Nora felt the room tilt. Mason did not move, but his face changed in a way that made every man in the room look away. "Find the launch team," he said. "Already moving." "No." Mason said softly, "Move faster." Silence fell. Nora understood then why men feared him. It was not because he shouted. It was because he did not need to. Grant cleared his throat. "Valdez sent word an hour before the drones. He wants a sit-down tomorrow. Gary Warehouse District, old steel property near the canal." Nora looked at Mason. "Tomorrow?" Mason nodded. "They are forcing a clock. It is a trap." "Yes." Everyone in the room said nothing because everyone already knew. Nora stepped toward him. "You cannot just say yes like that makes it manageable." Mason turned to her. "This is manageable because I know it is a trap." "That is insane." Grant looked like he agreed but had no intention of saying so. Mason's voice stayed low. "If I refuse, they test the house again. Maybe with drones. Maybe with men. Maybe with a car bomb at the gate. Maybe with a woman holding a baby at a grocery store so no one sees the gun until it is close enough." Nora flinched. Mason saw it and softened his voice, but not the truth. "They know about Eli. That changes the rules. The rules were already broken the second they took his picture." "Yes," Mason said, "which is why I end it." The rest of the day moved like a storm gathering behind glass. Nora tried to keep Eli on schedule. Breakfast, playtime, nap, lunch, blocks on the nursery rug. The ordinary rhythm of motherhood laid gently over the sound of men preparing for violence below. Eli had no idea. He clapped when blocks fell. He chased his stuffed elephant across the floor. He pulled himself up on the crib rail and laughed at his own power. Every sound he made seemed too bright for the house around him. Mason came and went, calls in Italian, calls in English. One brief conversation in Spanish that ended with his voice going so cold Nora left the hallway before he saw her listening. By evening, the estate felt sealed away from the world. Extra guards had arrived. Cars sat hidden near the tree line. The kitchen staff was sent home early. Grant moved through the rooms with a phone in one hand and a gun visible beneath his jacket. Nora found Mason in his study after Eli fell asleep. The lamps were low. Papers covered the desk. A half-empty glass of bourbon sat untouched near his hand. He was not reading. He was staring at a folder. When Nora entered, he closed it. That old motion. That old secrecy. Her heart sank. What is that? Mason looked at the folder, then back at her. For 1 second, she saw the instinct to hide. Then he pushed the folder across the desk. Nora approached slowly. Inside were legal documents. Her name appeared on the first page, then Eli's. Her fingers went numb as she turned the pages. Custody transfer in the event of Mason's death. Trusts, account access, safe houses, instructions for Grant, names of doctors, attorneys, pilots, security teams. Everything arranged. Everything anticipated. Nora looked up. You planned your death like a business transaction. Mason stood. I planned your survival. Her throat burned. Do not say that like it makes this better. It does not make it better. It makes it prepared. I do not want prepared. I want you not to go." His face tightened. "Nora, no. Do not use that voice." "What voice?" "The one that says the decision is already made and I am only here to witness it." Mason came around the desk slowly. "I have spent my whole life making sure the people under my protection had a plan if I did not come back. I am not one of your people. You are the mother of my son. That is not all I am." His eyes held hers. "No," he said. "It is not." The room seemed to lose air. Nora looked down at the folder again. The neat pages. The signatures already placed where they could be. The blank spaces waiting for her. "You think you are protecting me by handing me instructions for how to live without you?" Mason's voice went rough. "I am protecting myself from dying with the knowledge that I left you helpless." The anger inside her broke against something softer and more painful. "Mason." He looked away. For the first time since she had known him, he looked exhausted by his own strength. "If this goes wrong," he said, "Grant gets you and Eli out. You do not wait for me. You do not argue. You do not ask who is behind you. You take our son and you leave." "Our son?" she repeated quietly. His eyes returned to her. "Yes. There was a time when those words would have sounded like a claim. Tonight they sounded like a prayer." Nora stepped closer. "I am scared. I know. No. I need you to hear me. I am scared of Valdez. I am scared of the FBI. I am scared of your world. I am scared that every choice I make is the wrong one and Eli will be the one who pays for it." Mason reached for her, then stopped before touching her. That restraint cut through her more deeply than possession ever had. "I hear you," he said. She looked at his hand suspended between them. Then she took it. His fingers closed around hers carefully, as if she had given him something fragile. Nora did not know who moved first. Maybe neither of them. Maybe grief and fear pulled them together because there was nowhere else for all of it to go. She stepped into him. Mason's free hand rose to her cheek. His thumb brushed the corner of her mouth. His eyes searched hers, dark and hungry and almost pleading. "I do not want to be alone tonight," she whispered. His breath changed. "Nora, I mean it. Do you?" She nodded. "Eli is asleep. The house is locked down. Tomorrow is waiting whether we touch it or not." Her voice broke. "Tonight, I need you to stay." Mason kissed her forehead first. That nearly undid her. It was too gentle, too reverent, too full of everything he had failed to say when they were married. Then he kissed her mouth. Slowly, carefully, like a man asking permission from someone he once expected to obey. Nora answered by gripping his shirt and pulling him closer. The kiss changed. It became heat memory, apology, hunger. The kind of kiss that carried every night they had slept back to back with a wall of silence between them. Every goodbye they had not survived cleanly. Every almost truth. Every bruise left by love that did not know how to be kind. Mason lifted his head just enough to breathe. "I never stopped loving you," he said. Nora closed her eyes. "That makes it worse." "I know. It should make me smarter. It never made me smart." She laughed against his mouth, a broken sound, and he kissed it away. They did not go far. Just down the hall to his room, then hers, then neither, because the old boundaries had no meaning in a house bracing for war. They stopped outside Eli's nursery first. Together they looked in. Their son slept on his stomach, one knee tucked under him, curls soft against the sheet. The nightlight painted stars across the ceiling. Mason stood behind Nora, one hand resting lightly at her waist. Not holding her there, just touching. Nora covered his hand with hers. "He has your stubbornness," she whispered. "He has your courage. You do not know that yet." Mason's mouth brushed her hair. "I know exactly where he got the fight." Nora turned in his arms. The kiss that followed was quieter, but deeper. They made it to Mason's bedroom with the door closed and the monitors turned on low. The rest of the world fell away for a few hours. No cartel, no agents, no custody papers, no locked gates. Just skin breath, whispered names, and the terrible sweetness of finding home in the one place she had sworn never to return. Afterward, Nora lay with her cheek against Mason's chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. Alive. That word hurt. Mason's hand moved slowly over her hair. The room smelled like cedar and rain. Outside, guards walked the property. Somewhere in the distance, a radio murmured and went quiet. Nora stared into the dark. The burner phone was hidden in her closet. Agent Monroe was waiting. Mason's meeting was tomorrow. Her mouth opened before she could stop it. "I need to tell you something." Mason's hand stilled. For a second, she thought he already knew. Maybe he did. Then he kissed the top of her head. "Tomorrow, Mason. Tomorrow," he repeated, voice low. "Tonight, let me have this." The selfishness of it should have angered her. Instead, it broke her heart. So Nora stayed quiet. She told herself silence was mercy. But silence had never saved either of them. Mason left before dawn. Nora woke to the pale gray edge of morning and an empty space beside her. The sheets were still warm. On the pillow lay a folded note in Mason's precise handwriting. "Business. Home by dinner. I promise." She sat up slowly, holding the paper in both hands. A promise from Mason Cross was not fragile because he made it carelessly. It was fragile because men were already trying to kill the man who had made it. Down the hall, Eli woke babbling. Nora dressed him, fed him, changed him, sang to him. She did every ordinary thing with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. At 10, she walked into Mason's study. She told herself she was not searching. Then she searched anyway. The meeting location was not in the obvious files. Mason was too careful for that. It was on a handwritten note tucked beneath a shipping schedule written in Grant's blocky script. Gary Steel District, Old Calumet Works, 1 in the afternoon. Neutral entry from Canal Road. Nora stood at Mason's desk, staring at the words. Her heart began to pound so hard it blurred her vision. She saw Monroe's photograph of Eli, the red circle around his face. She saw the drones above the nursery window. She saw Mason asleep beside her, one hand still reaching for her, even in dreams. Then she took the burner phone from its hiding place and typed with shaking fingers. "Meeting today. Gary Steel District, Old Calumet Works, 1 in the afternoon. Valdez and Cross." "It is a trap." The reply came almost immediately. "Stay where you are. We are moving." Nora stared at the screen. "We are moving." The words should have relieved her. Instead, they made her feel like she had opened a door she could never close. At 12:45, Mason arrived at the abandoned steel property in Gary. Nora was not there, but later when people told the story in pieces, she could see it as clearly as if she had stood beside him. The sky was low and colorless over the old industrial district. Rusted beams cut into the air. Broken windows stared out from dead buildings. The canal water moved black and slow beside the warehouse. Graffiti covered the concrete walls, bright colors over old decay. Mason stepped out of the SUV in a black overcoat, Grant at his right, 2 men behind him. No wasted movement, no fear visible. Inside the warehouse, dust hung in pale shafts of light. Men waited near the center floor, Valdez men. Not the old boss himself, but his nephew, Rafael Valles, a smiling man with sharp cheekbones and dead eyes. The black crown tattoo marked the side of his neck. Mason saw it. Rafael smiled wider. "Cross. Valdez sends children now." Raphael touched his chest like the insult wounded him. He sends family. I thought you would respect that. Mason's face did not move. I respect very little about your family. Above them, hidden along the catwalks, men shifted into position. Mason heard it. Grant heard it too. Neither looked up. Raphael spread his hands. All this tension between us. It is bad for business. Chicago. The lake routes. The ports. We can share. No. You did not hear the offer. I heard enough. Raphael's smile thinned. You have a son now. The warehouse seemed to still. Grant's hand moved slightly. Mason did not blink. Raphael watched him with pleasure. A beautiful boy. Dark hair. Strong lungs. Your woman carries him like she knows the whole world wants to steal him. Mason took one step forward. Grant murmured, "Boss." Mason stopped. Raphael laughed softly. There he is. The father. Not so cold now. Mason's voice dropped. If you speak about my son again, you will not leave this building with your tongue. Raphael tilted his head. From somewhere outside came the faintest sound. A door closing. A tire over gravel. A radio crackle quickly silenced. Raphael heard it too. His eyes flicked toward the broken windows. Mason saw the moment he understood. FBI. The trap had teeth on both sides now. Raphael's smile vanished. You brought police? Mason's eyes narrowed. That was the first moment he knew. Not everything, but enough. Gunfire erupted from the catwalk. Grant shoved Mason sideways as concrete exploded where his head had been. Mason drew his weapon before he hit the ground. The warehouse became noise dust, muzzle flashes, men shouting in English and Spanish boots pounding metal stairs. Outside, black federal vehicles stormed through the rusted gates. Federal agents! A voice boomed through a speaker. Drop your weapons! No one dropped anything. A bullet caught Mason high in the shoulder. The impact spun him back against a steel column. For 1 second, the world went white. Then pain arrived, hot and brutal. Grant grabbed him. Mason, I'm fine. You are bleeding through your coat. Then stop admiring it and move. They fought their way toward the side exit as federal agents flooded the building. Raphael tried to run through the rear corridor. 2 agents tackled him near a rusted loading bay while he screamed threats that disappeared under sirens. Mason stumbled once. Grant caught him. Stay with me. Mason gritted his teeth. I made a promise. At the estate, Nora knew something had gone wrong before the phone rang. She had been sitting on the nursery floor with Eli, stacking blocks into a tower he destroyed every time with delighted violence. Her body was there. Her mind was in Gary hearing shots that might not exist. When her phone rang, she almost dropped it. Grant's voice came through tight and controlled. Nora! She stood so fast, Eli startled. How bad? A pause. Her knees weakened. Shoulder wound, Grant said. He is conscious. Angry. Bleeding too much. We are bringing him home. Nora closed her eyes. Home. He was coming home. 20 minutes, Grant said. Have the doctor ready. She moved like she had been trained for this, though no one had trained her for anything except surviving Mason Cross. She called the private physician. She sent Eli upstairs with a guard and kissed him until he squirmed. She cleared the dining room table because it was the largest flat surface in the house. She found clean towels, medical supplies, scissors, gloves, bottled water. Her hands shook only once when she saw Mason's note still folded on the counter. Home, by dinner. I promise. The SUVs arrived in a storm of tires over gravel. Nora opened the front door before anyone knocked. Grant came in, first blood on his sleeve. Then 2 men half-carried Mason between them. Mason's white shirt was soaked red beneath his open coat. His face was pale-mouthed tight with pain, but his eyes found Nora immediately. Something in him eased when he saw her. He tried to stand straighter. Do not, she snapped. His mouth curved faintly. Hello to you too. She moved to him, pressing a towel against the wound as the doctor rushed in behind her. If you make one joke, I swear to God, Mason, I came home. Her eyes burned. You are not allowed to sound proud of basic survival. His hand found her wrist. Bloody fingers. Weak grip. Still him. I promised. Nora bent her head for half a second, just long enough for her forehead to touch his. You are late for dinner. His faint smile disappeared into a grimace as the doctor cut his shirt open. The next hours blurred into blood orders, metal instruments, and Mason refusing pain medication until Nora leaned over him and told him in a voice that shook with fury that if he wanted to act like an idiot, he could do it after the bullet was out. He took the medication. Grant looked away, hiding a smile badly. The bullet had gone through muscle missing bone and anything that would have killed him. That was what the doctor said. Nora heard the words. She understood them. Still, when Mason finally slept pale and bandaged in his own bed, she sat beside him and watched his chest rise and fall until her eyes ached. Her burner phone buzzed just after midnight. She stepped into the bathroom and answered. Agent Monroe spoke without greeting. 7 arrests in Gary. 11 more across Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri. Rafael Valdez is in custody. Your information gave us the window. Nora closed her eyes. Is it over? No. But their Midwest operation is crippled. Leadership will be fighting itself for months. She leaned against the sink. I did not do it for you. I know. I did it for my family. Monroe was quiet for a moment. Then your family is safer tonight. Nora ended the call. For a few seconds she stood in the bathroom with the phone in her hand staring at her reflection. Pale face, tired eyes, blood on the cuff of her sleeve. Mason's blood. She washed her hands until the water ran clear. When she stepped back into the bedroom, Mason was awake. The lamp beside the bed cast gold across his face. Pain had sharpened him, stripped him down, but his eyes were clear. Too clear. Nora stopped in the doorway. Mason looked at the burner phone in her hand, then at her face. His voice was rough from pain, low enough that it barely filled the room. How long have you been talking to the FBI? The question did not explode. It landed quietly. That made it worse. Nora stood in the doorway with the burner phone still in her hand. Mason's blood dried at the edge of her sleeve, and the whole room seemed to narrow around the space between them. The bathroom light behind her threw her shadow across the floor. Mason lay against the pillows, one shoulder wrapped in white bandages, his face pale from blood loss, his eyes too awake for a man who had nearly died hours earlier. She could have lied. The old Nora might have. The scared Nora. The Nora who had deleted his number and built a whole life out of silence because silence felt safer than trusting him. But silence had brought them here. So she closed her fingers around the phone and stepped into the room. Since Chicago, she said. Mason did not move. His jaw tightened once. That long. Yes. His eyes dropped briefly to the phone, then returned to her face. Agent Caleb Monroe. Nora felt the air leave her. You know his name. I have known his name for 2 weeks. The floor seemed to tilt under her. She gripped the back of the chair beside his bed. You knew one of my men saw you in Evanston. Coffee shop near campus. Gray coat. Corner table. Monroe paid cash and left first. His voice stayed level, but every word cut clean. I had him checked. Nora stared at him. Why did you not say anything? Mason gave a faint, humorless breath. I wanted to know whether you were trying to destroy me. The words hit harder than anger. She came closer slowly, as if the wrong movement might shatter the room. I was not. I know. You know. His gaze held hers. You never gave them my roots. Not the ones that matter. You never gave them cross-harbor accounts. You never gave them names from inside my organization unless they were connected to Valdez's movement. Monroe wanted more than you gave him. Nora's throat tightened. How do you know that? Because I know men like Monroe. They ask for a window and try to climb into the house. She looked down at the burner phone in her hand. It felt cheap and ugly now, ridiculous almost for something that had carried so much fear. I should have told you. Yes. The answer came without softness. Nora flinched. Mason saw it, but he did not take the word back. You lied to me, he said. You sat at my table. You slept in my bed. You let me walk into Gary knowing federal agents were already moving on that building. I thought they could help. They did. I thought Valdez would kill you. They tried. I saw the photo, Mason. His eyes sharpened. What photo? Nora crossed the room and placed the burner phone on the bed beside his uninjured hand. Her fingers shook as she opened the message thread and found the image Monroe had sent after their first meeting. Eli in the park swing. Laughing. His face circled in red. For the first time since she entered the room, Mason's control broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. His face went still in a way that looked almost inhuman. Then his eyes changed. Nora had seen him angry before. She had seen him cold, suspicious, wounded, possessive. This was different. This was the kind of rage that did not burn outward because it had gone too deep for flame. He picked up the phone carefully as if it might break in his hand. How long did you have this since Evanston? And you did not show me. I thought you would lock the whole world down. I would have. I know. His eyes snapped to hers. Good. No, she said, voice cracking. Not good. You would have moved Eli deeper into the house. You would have doubled the guards. You would have shut every door and told me it was for our protection. It would have been. And I would have disappeared again. The words changed the room. Mason looked at her for a long moment. Nora stepped closer to the bed, no longer trying to hide the tears in her eyes. I was terrified. Not only of Valdez, not only of Monroe, of you too. His face tightened. I never hurt you. No, you did something worse. You made every decision so I would never have to see the danger, and then you called that love. Mason looked away. Nora took a breath, but it shook coming out. When I met Monroe, I did not feel safe. I felt cornered. But for the first time since Portland, someone put another weapon on the table. Not yours, not your men, not your rules. Mine. You trusted the FBI over me. I trusted nobody. She wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand. That is the truth. I did not trust Monroe. I did not trust your world. I did not trust myself to know the difference between protection and control anymore. Mason closed his eyes for a second. Pain crossed his face, though she did not know if it came from the wound or from her words. When he opened his eyes, his voice was lower. You should have told me. I know. No, Nora. You should have told me because I would have understood the photo. You would have gone to war that night. Yes. That is exactly why I did not tell you. His mouth tightened. Silence settled between them, heavy and alive. From the baby monitor on the nightstand came the soft sound of Eli breathing in his crib. One tiny sigh, a shift against the mattress. The smallest proof that everything they had done, every lie, every wound, every impossible choice had been for the same sleeping child. Mason looked toward the monitor. When he spoke again, the anger had not left him, but something else had entered with it. I spent years believing that if I controlled every variable, I could keep loss away. Nora did not speak. He stared at the ceiling as if the confession required distance. My father taught me that love made men careless. He said family was a door your enemies could walk through if you ever let them see where it was. I believed him because I watched it happen. Nora stepped closer. Mason's eyes stayed fixed above him. I was 12 when my mother died. Car bomb. Meant for my father. She took his car because hers would not start. He never cried, not once. At the funeral, he told me grief was useful only if it sharpened you. Nora's anger faltered. Mason breathed carefully, protecting the injured shoulder. When I married you, I thought distance was mercy. I thought if I gave you money, comfort, a name, and enough walls, I could love you without making you bleed for it. His eyes moved to her. But all I did was teach you that my love came with locked doors. Nora sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped. Mason did not reach for her. That restraint mattered more than any apology could have. "I wanted you to let me in," she whispered. "I know that now. I begged you. I know. You made me feel foolish for needing a husband who came home as a whole person." Mason swallowed. "I was a coward with you." That word from him was almost shocking. Nora stared at him. Mason Cross did not offer weakness easily. He did not hand anyone a blade unless he had already calculated how to survive the cut. But this was not calculation. His face was bare with exhaustion and truth. "I faced men with guns more honestly than I faced you at breakfast," he said. "Because bullets made sense. You did not. You wanted things from me I did not know how to give without feeling like I was handing you a map to my destruction." Nora's voice softened. "And then I proved you right by hiding Eli." His eyes darkened. "For a while I thought that. And now," his gaze moved toward the baby monitor again. "Now I think you were alone because I made being with me impossible." The tears came then, quiet and hot. Nora covered her mouth, trying to keep the sound in. Mason shifted, wincing, and she immediately reached for him. "Do not move." He ignored her enough to lift his good hand toward her. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His fingers were warm around hers. "I am still angry," he said. "I know. I do not know how to trust what I cannot see. I know that too. And you cannot live in a house where love feels like surveillance." "No," she whispered. "I cannot." His thumb moved once across her knuckles. "Then we change the house." Nora looked at him. Not the estate, not the walls, not the cameras. The house between them. "The rules have to be real," she said. Mason nodded once. "Say them." She took a breath. "No hidden threats. If someone moves against Eli, I know. If someone moves against you and that affects us, I know. Not after. Not when you decide I can handle it. I know when it happens." Agreed. No using custody as a weapon. Ever. Something moved in his face. Regret, sharp and immediate. Agreed. I keep my own lawyer, my own money, my own phone, and if I meet with federal agents, attorneys, doctors, anyone connected to Eli's safety, you do not have me followed like a prisoner. Mason's jaw tightened from instinct. Nora saw it. He saw her see it. Then he said, "Agreed. You do not get to punish me for being afraid." His grip tightened slightly. "No. And I do not get to hide behind fear and call it protection." Mason's eyes softened. "No." The baby monitor crackled. Eli made a small, restless sound, then settled again. Nora looked toward it. "When he is old enough to ask who we are, I want to have an answer that does not sound like an excuse." Mason followed her gaze. "He will know I am his father." "Yes. But I want him to know you are also a man who chose him over pride." Mason was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I can do that." Nora looked back at him. "Can you?" He did not answer quickly. She respected that. "I will fail. Sometimes," he said. "I will reach for control when I am scared. I will want to solve problems with force before patience. I will hate Monroe every time his name comes up." Despite herself, Nora almost smiled. "That last one is fair. But I will tell you the truth," Mason said, "even when my first instinct is to bury it." Nora held his hand between both of hers. "And I will tell you when I am scared, before I turn fear into a secret." The promise did not fix everything. Promises never did. But for the first time, neither of them was pretending love could survive without truth. 3 days later, Agent Monroe came to the estate through the front gate. That alone told Nora something had changed. He arrived in a government sedan with another agent driving. Mason watched from the front steps, one arm in a sling beneath his coat, looking like a wounded king deciding whether to allow a priest into his castle. Nora stood beside him, not behind him. Monroe stepped out of the car and buttoned his jacket. "Mr. Cross." Mason looked at him with open dislike. "Agent Monroe, I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I did not agree because I appreciate you." Nora gave Mason a look. He glanced at her, then back at Monroe. "I agreed because my wife asked me to." The word wife moved through Nora quietly. They were not remarried. Not yet. But Mason said it without performance, without correction, without looking to see if she would object. She did not. Inside, they met in the study with attorneys on speaker, and Grant standing near the door like he would enjoy throwing Monroe through it. Monroe explained the charges: racketeering, trafficking, attempted murder, conspiracy tied to the warehouse ambush. Rafael Valdez was cooperating badly, which Monroe described as both useful and irritating. Several leaders had been arrested across 3 states. The network was wounded, not dead. "We may need Nora to testify in closed proceedings," Monroe said. Mason's face hardened. "No." Nora turned to him. "Mason." He looked at her, and she saw the fight in him, the instinct to forbid, to protect, to close the door and stand in front of it. His hand flexed once on the desk. Then he exhaled. What would testimony require? Monroe's eyebrows lifted slightly as if he had expected more blood on the carpet. Limited appearance, protected identity measures where possible, security coordination. "My security coordinates with yours," Mason said. Monroe almost smiled. "That might be complicated. I did not ask if it would be simple." Nora reached beneath the table and touched Mason's knee. Not to stop him, to remind him he was not alone in the decision. Mason covered her hand with his. Monroe saw it. His expression changed just a fraction. Maybe he understood then that Nora had not chosen the FBI over Mason. She had chosen Eli over everyone. The weeks after Gary did not become peaceful, but they became livable. Mason healed badly because he hated being still. Nora caught him taking calls from bed reviewing files with one hand and trying to lift Eli before the doctor cleared him. She threatened to call Dr. Price in Portland and tell on him. He accused her of cruelty. She said she had learned from the best. Eli learned to walk properly during Mason's recovery. Not careful little steps anymore, but full-body fearless, stumbling through the halls with his arms raised like victory. Every person in the house rearranged their life around his path. Guards moved vases. Grant installed soft corner covers with the grim focus of a man defusing bombs. The first time Eli toddled across Mason's study and slapped both hands on his father's knees, Mason looked down at him as if the whole world had knelt. "Duh," Eli said. The room went silent. Nora stood in the doorway holding a folder of contracts. Mason did not move. Eli slapped his knee again, offended by the lack of response. "Duh." Mason bent slowly, carefully, ignoring the pull in his shoulder, and lifted him. "Yeah," he whispered. His voice was thick. I am here. Eli patted his cheek. Mason closed his eyes. Nora looked away, but not before he saw her tears. That night they stood together in the nursery after Eli fell asleep. The house was quiet. Snow moved beyond the windows, softening the grounds, covering the cameras, the gates, the tire tracks, all the evidence of what it took to keep danger away. Mason stood close enough that their shoulders touched. I missed his first word, he said. No, Nora said. You did not. He looked at her. She said, the daycare thought he said mama once, but I think he was angry at a banana. Mason smiled. A real smile. It changed his whole face. Nora leaned into him carefully, mindful of his shoulder. He kissed her hair. Months passed. Nora testified behind closed doors. Mason sat outside the secure room with Grant and 2 attorneys, furious and silent, but he did not stop her. Monroe kept his word. Mostly. Mason kept his temper. Mostly. Valdez men went to prison. Others turned on each other. The Midwest routes changed hands in quieter ways that Nora chose not to ask about until Mason was ready to answer, and Mason, to his credit, answered more than she expected. Cross Harbor Group became cleaner under Nora's eye. Not innocent. She was not naive enough to believe empires washed themselves white because a man loved his son. But cleaner. Contracts were rewritten. Companies folded. Partnerships ended. Mason cut away anything that brought heat too close to Eli's future. One evening, Nora found a small velvet box on her desk. She did not open it at first. Mason stood by the window, pretending not to watch. What is this, a question? You usually ask those with lawyers present. I am trying something new. Nora opened the box. The ring was not the one from their first marriage. That mattered. This one was simpler. An oval diamond set low elegant but not cold. Something she could wear while holding Eli, signing contracts, living a life instead of posing inside one. Her chest tightened. Mason. He came closer. No ballroom, no press, no performance. I am not asking you to return to what we were. What are you asking? His eyes held hers. To build what we should have been. Slowly. Honestly. With escape routes you do not need because I stopped making you want them. Nora laughed through sudden tears. That is not very romantic. I am out of practice. It was close. He took the ring from the box but did not reach for her hand. He waited. That was the answer she needed before she gave her own. Nora held out her hand. The ceremony happened in spring beneath the old oak trees at the Lake Forest estate. No photographers, no society guests, no crystal ballroom full of people pretending not to fear the groom. Paige stood beside Nora, still suspicious of Mason, but softer now that she had seen him crawl across the nursery floor while Eli rode on his back like a tiny king. Grant stood beside Mason, holding the rings with the same expression he wore when handling firearms. Eli clapped at the wrong time and shouted "Da" during the vows. Everyone laughed. Even Mason. Afterward, when the judge left and the small group wandered toward the house, Nora remained under the oak tree with Mason. The air smelled like wet grass and lake wind. He touched the ring on her finger. You are quiet. I am thinking. That always worries me. It should. His mouth curved. Nora looked toward Eli, who was chasing Paige across the lawn while Grant followed at a careful distance, pretending he was not enjoying himself. I am still scared sometimes, she said. Mason's smile faded, but he did not tense. Tell me when. She looked back at him. That is the difference, is it not? Yes, he said. No grand promise followed. No vow that danger would never return. Mason knew better than to lie, and Nora loved him too much now to ask for one. Instead, he took her hand. Not to lead, not to hold her in place, just to stand beside her while their son laughed under a bright Illinois sky beyond the reach of the storm that had brought them back to each other.